Thank you so much for staying with us. This is BTM News today, and just like we had earlier promised, Joseph Kabuleta is here, former presidential aspirant and also the man who advocated so much for financial liberation for the country. We are so happy to have you today, Mr. Kabuleta.
I'm so glad to be here.
And thank you so much for honoring our invitation once again.
You're welcome.
We're going to begin with you've always talked so much about finances and the liberation of this country that you consider we seem to be somewhere far away. Let us start with number one, the big tax burden that we are being put on as a country. Shall we recover from this?
No, the tax burden is very unfair because there are very few people who are paying taxes. Remember, there is about 70% of Ugandans who are not contributing to the income tax because they are still in peasantry, and they have largely been kept in peasantry because they are the ones who are supposed to keep this government in power. So they have very small dreams. They have been kept that way. They are very easily appeasable. Even if they are not happy, they will probably exchange a vote for a few thousand shillings, maybe for a sewing machine, a bicycle, something like that. So they are necessary for that reason to keep the system in place. And as long as they are there, and as long as they do not rise up, or at least add their percentage to those who are rising up, it's going to be very difficult for the people who feel disgruntled to rise up themselves because they are a very small number. Oh, that brings me to the tax burden that you asked. There is about 27 or 28% of Ugandans who actually contribute all the taxes, who carry the tax bracket, the tax burden rather. And because the percentage is so small and very, very, very small even in comparison to other East African countries, they have to keep on tightening the screw of the taxes because there are few people who have to be carrying the whole burden of collecting taxes and so on. That includes that, and that is the middle class. Those are people who are involved in businesses, importation and exportation. That includes all the corporate class, workers who pay as you earn and so on. So they are the ones who carry all the tax burden. So because they are few and because the government's needs are increasing every other time, those people the burden that they have to carry is heavier and heavier, and their backs are getting, more bent and more bent. So
how will all this end?
It's not going to end in this regime. There has to be a change because there is the 70% who I said their work is to keep the government in power because they are kept at a level of small dreams. Then there is the 27 or 28% who pay the taxes. Then there is the 2%, a few people who are, I call, the people at the top, the royal family who are connected, who have all the businesses, have all the wealth, have all the contracts for minerals and oil and so on, but they don't pay taxes. So now, for the tax burden to reduce for this middle class, 27 or 28%, the other small enclave of people who have all the money have to start contributing taxes, and then we have to increase our tax base to bring some of these peasants out of peasantry into some kind of middle class. Then they can also contribute their tax burden. In other words, widen the tax base. And then we can then reduce the taxes because more people are paying.
The president has been sworn in for another 5 years, and you're saying this cannot change if the government does not change. So Ugandans are going to be subjected to all this for the next 5 years.
It's going to get worse. If you think this tax regime that has been implemented is bad, just brace yourself. It's going to get worse every other year because the government's appetite for money is not going to reduce, and the percentage of people paying taxes is not going to increase. So guess what's going to increase? The number of taxes that is being charged on all sorts of other things, on consumables and so on. And then also the efficiency of URA in collecting those taxes from where they should be collected is also might improve, but at a very small level. So eventually what happens is they just increase the taxes or find new places to tax. Now they've come with the rental income tax. So they just go for different things to tax, but it's the same people that are being taxed, and they are almost double or triple taxed in most cases. So it's going to get worse.
Was COVID-19 one of those big highlights that affected us economically as a country and affected the growth and development in the past year?
Of course, the whole COVID affected us, but it could have been handled a lot better because let's not forget that a lot of money was taken in loans in the period of COVID. And if it had been used the way it was supposed to be used, we could have, kind of cushioned ourselves from the whole economic disaster that came with COVID. Because remember, we were at almost 47, 48 trillion, our total debt burden. Now we're at 67 trillion, 66, 67 trillion.
Yeah,
so
66.
we've increased 20 trillion in this year from March 2020 to right now. So that 20 trillion is a lot of money. That's actually the entirety of what URA is going to collect this year, or is projecting, just slightly under what they are projecting to collect. So that's a lot of money that we've taken in loan. So if it had been used well, then we could have mitigated some of these losses that are, breakages of businesses and so on that came with COVID. But then we didn't. So now what COVID has done, it has just widened the gap between the haves and the have-nots. The haves are busy building malls, and so, and there are buildings which shocked me. There is a place where I passed, and a building came up from zero to completion, total completion.
You never know, someone could have been saving for years.
No, I'm not. Well, my point is, I'm not saying necessarily saying that building belongs to somebody who was taking COVID money, but I know that a lot of COVID money was going places like that. So, in one area, buildings are running in 1 year, a whole complex is completed. On the other hand, people are now totally desperate. So many jobs have been lost. So many industries have not been opened yet. People who are in entertainment, people who are in night businesses, restaurants are operating still at half capacity because they have to close at 8 because of the curfew. If they just remove the curfew, then so many people, about 200,000 Ugandans would get back into jobs who are not working right now, because restaurants mostly work at night. That's when people go to dine. If they open the bars, and so many people will get back in jobs. But what's the point of the curfew? None whatsoever. There's no point in the curfew. So, but it is still just increasing the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
Joseph, let's look at this. Let's look at jobs. You've mentioned jobs, and you made me remember the nurses have been on a sit-down strike, and now the intern doctors are also sitting down because they want the money increased from 900,000 to about 3 million. But the government says it doesn't have money to do this at this point. And what are your thoughts on this?
Here's the thing. The truth is, there's no way the government is going to increase salaries of anybody from 900 to 300 million.
To 3 million.
To 3 million, rather. It's not going to happen. Okay, not this government. And I'm not saying those people don't deserve it. They absolutely deserve it. But they're not going to get it from this government. And the teachers have been down that road. They have increments of 28,000 a year in their salaries. And even government blows about that. If you are seeing the education policy which was put out by the Minister of Education, and she has shown how teachers' salaries have grown by almost about 100 and something thousand in 4-5 years. So that's what they consider increment. Think about that. Now these ones are demanding for more than 300% increase. It's not going to happen, not with this government. That's why we talk about financial liberation, because these people don't believe anybody deserves to have money apart from themselves. That's the truth. So everybody else has to be existing on some kind of pecuniary basis, stay down there, while for them they are glorified in, owning everything. So the sit-down doctors, eventually the people who are going to suffer will be the patients, and after everything is said and done, they still will not have that money. They might get an increase, but it's not going to be that big.
As we wind up, Joseph, my second last question, actually, I want you to be so brief on this. The president says that he does not want the country to be depending so much on European donations and donations from outside. He wants us to have our own economy getting up and, supporting ourselves, for example, in our budget and the rest of these activities we've been talking about here. Is there a possibility that that will happen?
No. Let me tell you, about 20 years ago, perhaps about 1996, after he had just been elected, I remember hearing a speech by the president, and that time people still believed him. At least I still believed him. There are some people who still believe him, unfortunately, but I don't, and I stopped believing him a long time ago. But now, that time he said, imagine at the time we were financing about 57 or 58% of our budget was gotten from local taxes. And he was saying that his purpose was to increase that, and we go until eventually we can finance 100% of our budget.
Yeah, that's right.
And then he even said that then we shall even have a surplus, so that we go to the Paris Club as donors rather than as beggars. And I said, wow, that would be good, where we're actually financing everything about ourselves, and now even we can go there to the Paris Club where they go to beg for money. And now we're not there to beg for money, we're there to give money. That was 1996. and we're at 58% of our budget. Guess where we are now? At less than 50. We are around 47%, 48%. So we are retrogressing, okay? And the trend is clear. So there is nothing to show that we are going forward. If we are going forward even a little, then maybe you would say time will come. But we are going backwards. So by the current trend, we are more likely to continually be dependent on donors, and we are more likely to try and squeeze to milk this cow called the taxpayers beyond its capacity, because we are trying to increase. And then in all this time, the reason we are retrogressing is two. Number one, the government's appetite went up. So we are not reducing our expenditures, okay? And number two, a lot of the businesses that were bringing revenue at the time were crushed one way or the other, okay? So in the absence of these businesses and with the government increasing its appetite, we are retrogressing. In terms of, very soon we'll be only, at this rate, we'll soon be financing only 40% of our budget, and that's sad.
I just got this information, maybe your words on it. Uganda Airlines had a PR company which over-invoiced money to the tune of 1.3 billion instead of the 600 plus, I think, the money that was intended for. Doesn't this undermine the government's fight against corruption?
There is no fight against corruption. Why do you take? There is absolutely no fight against corruption. There is just a veneration of corruption and the corrupt. Now let me tell you, Uganda Airlines, the idea of having a national carrier was good, but it was not gotten into with a lot of thinking and with a lot of planning ahead. Number two, the environment that exists right now of corruption makes it very difficult for us to profitably manage a national carrier. Why? Because there's a lot of corruption in the whole system. Remember, national carriers across the world are suffering. They are making losses. I think only two airlines in Africa are making profit. And that is through frugal appropriation of resources and making sure things are done properly. They still manage to make finances. Big airlines like South Africa were on the verge of collapse. So when we started ours, everybody was collapsing. So we should have thought it out better. Number two, there was also a problem with ownership. Who owns it? But then, remember, Uganda Airlines, they suspended a boss, and it turns out that his biggest crime was refusing to over-invoice when they are getting money from the Ministry of Works and Transport, so that he can give the remainder to ministry officials. So you go and say, this is the amount of money we need. They say, add this amount of money, the rest you give to us. And the man says, no, I'm not going to condone that. And guess who suffers? Not the ministry official, no. Because that's the system that's operational. It's the man who is insisting that he's not going to be corrupt. So he's the one who is suspended. So that's the system that currently is. Now you may find the PR company was not going to over-invoice. You may find the people who are paying were the ones saying, okay, what is your bill? 600 million. Okay, add this amount for us, and we shall pay you this amount, and you give us the rest. I am almost certain that is the scenario that happened there. Because there is no PR company which is going to come, and because these are international PR companies, they have a reputation to protect. They are in the business of reputations.
Yeah, that's right.
You understand? So, but if the only way the man is going to get paid is by over-invoicing, because the ministry official who is supposed to sign against his payment is insisting the only way I'm going to sign across is if I have my difference in there, then guess what the PR company is going to do? He's going to go and play ball, because he's not the one who set this system. He found it there, and he wants his money. So that's what is happening.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Thank you so much for coming for here today. And it's always a pleasure. We hope when you call you back, you'll be just back right with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, we are just going for a very small short break, and BTM News Today continues after the break. Stay with us.